survivors. It will be a long day. In introducing Slobodan Naumovic, I have to confess that I will be a little bit subjective because I'm admiring him for something like 20 years. To my best knowledge, he's the best anthropologist in the Balkans, and I know a lot of them, believe me. And what I would also like to say is that, as you will see today, Slobodan is one of the most anthropologically engaged people I know, meaning not politically engaged or ideologically engaged, but taking anthropology damn serious as a matter of life and society and what really anthropology matters, so to say. And there is always a moral dimension in everything he's doing, from fieldwork to conferences. And well, I will stop here and give the floor to Slobodan Naumovic. Thank you.
Thank you, Attila. It's a great pleasure to be here and to be with you. Now, what I want to do is not at all give a lecture. It's not going to be a lecture. I will share with you some thoughts and concerns about the present state of anthropology, basically in my country, but also eventually globally as well. And it will, to a certain extent, it will go against the best of evidence that you've presented yesterday. What was evident yesterday is that anthropology is a thriving science, live, caring about the details, caring about the people, and transmitting that enthusiasm about us, in fact, about everybody who is a human being, to everybody else who is concerned. And that is wonderful, and that's, thank God that anthropology exists. It's not, of course, the only one. But there's another side to it, there's a more gloomy side to it. And for me, the gloom comes from what I've called, and I'm not the only one, from what I've called the retreat of the real. Now, it might seem as a paradox, because what was evident yesterday was the reality of it. So much care about the details, about the everyday, about what people do, about how they do what they do, why they do what they do. Isn't that about reality? Yes, yes it is. But let's start from a visual metaphor. So, okay, yesterday we started with an image of people walking through a square in London, and we were focusing in let's say, their middles and what they wear. That's what anthropology is good about. It puts into vision, so to say, bits and pieces of life, and it can tell you a lot from these bits and pieces. But there's a wider picture. If we use the metaphor of the camera, if we widen a little bit, we will see the square. Of course, there's the people walking in jeans, but there's more to it. There's, for instance, a set of cameras that are filming the square. And everybody that walks is filmed not only by the sight of anthropologists, but by CCTV of the state, or of state apparatus. And so nobody is beyond the interest of that state. Now, what I want to say today is that we've been forgetting the wider picture to a certain extent. Thrilled, exhilarated by the moving bottoms, by the life itself. We tend to forget that there's cameras filming us, and that produces real consequences for the way we live our lives. And to a certain extent, I ask myself as an anthropologist, as most of us are, why did that happen? Can we explain that phenomenon? Can we answer the question, why have we lost part of the wider picture? I don't believe that many will share the idea that the wider picture is in fact what anthropology should be about. We, to a certain extent, we started with ideas of wide pictures, but then as as we professionalized ourselves, we became specialists of the detail, of the lively detail, of the skin and flesh, of the moving bodies, and we really, and of the way that we live in those bodies and the way that we think about the bodies, our own and other people's bodies. We are very good at that. Nobody is as close to the flesh and to the experience of being in the flesh as we anthropologists. So it was a development in a given course, and it's the ways that we've developed for getting there are spectacular, and people are learning from us. They're stealing our trade. Political scientists, psychologists, sociologists, they steal the knowledge of the method of getting into the skin of people, because that is very good, very relevant, very important knowledge. But on the way there's losses that we made, and the losses have to do with the wider. We're also experts at contextualization. We put the bodies and the feelings and the expressions and the explanations that people give into a context. But the context that we put things into is more or less the room. Yes, I'm here, and yes, you are here. And so if you want to know something about me, you'll also take into account the fact that I am here with you. But then there's British Council as well. We don't take into account the fact that money comes from British Council. That's not necessarily our cup of tea. And to a certain extent, it's where the strength of what we do comes from. Because when you cut it out, you can focus more clearly on the vividness of human experience. But that's not everything. And to a certain extent, the vividness of our experience is becoming less and less vivid because some things are interfering with it. And these things have to do with the wider image that we quite often forget, usually for the better, but sometimes also for the worse. So that is what I call the retreat of the real. It has theoretical reasons, it has methodological reasons, it also has political reasons, it has a lot of reasons. But we don't often think of these reasons. We don't think about the whole fact itself. And that is where our weakness is. I would say that it was not, as a moment ago I said, it was not always like that. But then we were not so good at what we do at the beginning. So everything comes with a price to a certain extent. We got something, we got the ability to do brilliant ethnography at a certain price. The price was the wider picture. You generally have difficulties in really having all sorts of views together. But we were good at that as well. We are good at going from the detail up to a wider scale. But for my personal taste, the scale of the wide angle that we are now using is not wide enough. Perhaps one of the reasons is that the pictures that we are looking at, that we are viewing, have changed. The world has changed, and it is wider in a sense. It is wider because more things are implicated in every second of our existence. There was a time when being in a room was what the whole world was about. There was nothing else that mattered. It was a small community, and it was very often not in regular contact with other communities. And understanding such a community meant giving it the context that it needs, and that is the room, metaphorically speaking. But now it simply doesn't work. Now there's this camera, now there's something else, now there's the people who finance this, there's the people who want this to happen. And without taking account of them, we can't understand what is happening here. It doesn't mean that we can reduce what is happening here or anywhere in a small community by relating it to the wider context. But it also means that without taking into account the wider context, we will not fully understand what is going on in a small room. And to a certain extent, well, you might say, well, what are the trade-offs? What do we gain, what do we lose? And to a certain extent, what we gain is much more important than what we lose. But then we lose, so to say, the reins of what we do. Because then we don't care about the people who do try to have hold of the reins. Now this is a very powerful metaphor, and it goes into, but that is a concern that I have, and that is what I want to share with you. I personally am not quite sure that things are like that, but I have a feeling, and this feeling started, and I'll share with you how it started. It started, well, it started in the worst possible of times. It started during the wars of Yugoslav secession. There was a tremendous amount of horror going on around where I lived. Not necessarily where I lived, but the horror came to me as well. But not that kind of horror. But what was interesting was the way that, as an anthropologist, you could understand that, and also the way that you could check out how other people who were also anthropologists understood what was going on. And that was, for me, a devastating blow. Many of the people from my own tribe, anthropologists, people who are professional nations, they were going for telling the detail as it is, or finding ways of the details in the way which would be responsible to those who lived the details. That's a very important thing to do, and it's perhaps one of the best things that we can do as humans, giving full account of the experience of other people. But still, they were getting wrong what was going on. And for me, it was a big loss in a certain sense. It was a loss of confidence in the discipline I belonged to. Loss of confidence in the sense that what we are producing, with all the qualities that it has, was not relevant to a specific type of human situation which is spectacularly important for everybody who is implied by it, and even for the people who are not directly implied by it. So to a certain extent, what we could, as anthropologists, say, and what has mostly been said about such an event, or such a series of events, that would be more precise, was to a certain extent, it was can't say a disgrace, but it was disappointment. And from then onwards, I'm trying to explain to myself how this could happen, why it happened, and what can we do to make things better, in the sense of finding ways of producing more credible, and that is where real problems start. What sort of picture should we produce? How will we call it? What is it that was lacking? Where is the problem? And to a certain extent, the explanation that I gave myself is the retreat from reality. People were telling a lot of things about anthropologists, about what was going on, but the focus was producing a picture that is not real to the fullest. And I believe there we have, or at least I have a problem, because I would have to explain to you what a real picture, what being true would be. And I don't have a clear answer. I know of many people who are desperately trying to find an answer, criticizing what is being done, proposing alternatives. critical realism in the tradition of Roy Bashkar perhaps would be one way of spelling it out. There's people like, for instance, political sciences like Ian Shapiro, who have been trying to write about the flight from reality in human sciences. It's the title of the book. So it's not a personal catastrophic experience. It's a wider discussion, and the discussion is engaging people in different disciplines, in different countries, at different moments, but more or less in the, let's say, in the 1 or 2 decades, more or less from now backwards. So there is a growing concern amongst many people in many sciences, if I can say, that there is something wrong. There is a part of the picture that is missing, and people are trying to respond to that. So you simply can't explain away my case by saying, okay, it's a bloke who got lost in the war. There's something more to it. Of course, you can explain all the cases in various ways. There's a guy who wants to make it to the top. He's criticizing other people, and thus is producing an intelligent campaign for his own candidacy as the best social scientist or whatever. But if you look at it, it's a relatively risky business. It's not the trajectory that many would make, because it doesn't necessarily promise to pay off. So then why are people doing it? Why are those that are doing it if it's not the best way to get to the top? And it is not. Especially in anthropology, it is not. You know, there's quite a number of years when one of the leading figures of British anthropology said reality is a business for mystics. And I can't say that's when it all started, but it was a way of taking into our science what was discussed, what was thought about in philosophy, for instance, and redesigning our science to accommodate these insights, so to say, these ways of looking at things, or discussing things, or thinking about things. And I can't say that is the moment when it all started, but to a certain extent, that is the moment when you can hear, or when you can read that the process is going on. Whether it started at that moment is a difficult and perhaps an irrelevant question. What is important is not the beginnings, it's the process, it's the flow, and it's the changes in the flow. And if you look at those things, you can see that there are important events that you can relate the process of flight, as Shapiro would say, flight from reality, that you can relate them with. 1968 and years slightly before and after, they meant something, and the 80s also meant something. When you have a person saying that society doesn't exist, it's only the individuals that exist, and if it's not a social scientist, if it's a politician, then the saying creates and is intended to create social realities. Because of saying that society doesn't exist, we are killing off the opportunities for society to exist. That is what we do. We should be aware of that. By imagining ways of describing that which is, we are producing that. One of the tricks that we learned relatively recently is exactly that. The fact that we, by describing, by inventing ideas about the world, that we, in fact, make the world. That the world doesn't exist independently from what we think about it, and that the way we imagine it is part of what makes it as it is. But then, if you say that society doesn't exist, you kill off society if society could exist. I'm not into discussing whether society does or does not exist. I'm into the politics of pronouncements about society which believe that they are anchored in some sort of positive knowledge about how things are. And that is what science is about. And we are the suppliers of these things. If it were not for people like us, these pronouncements, these political pronouncements, would not have been made. So to a certain extent, we are responsible for that. And my deepest fear is that we'll be responsible for something much more important and possibly dangerous than the fact that we are responsible for the non-existence of society. We might be responsible to a certain extent for the non-existence of humanity. And if you look at the things that have been said by people who practice this or other social sciences, well, they are responsible for that because they did say that humanity doesn't exist. Nothing exists, according to a set of people who were producing social science, or they wouldn't agree that it was social science, but they were producing something. They were producing writings about what usually social scientists write about in the, let's say, last 3 decades. And they did say that there's no way of knowing whether anything exists, and there's no way why bothering about that should be an issue at all. So what they were saying was basically, okay, let's write, let's speak, and that's that. No other need, no need to check out whether and to what extent what we are saying, what we are writing is anchored in anything. Because anyway, we can't know about anything. We can't know anything about anything. So what really matters is what we say and nothing else. That's the end of it. That means a reductio, not ad absurdum, but add a word. Or a set of words, a text. So whatever exists, and we don't know what exists, but whatever exists is a text. And whatever we can do is either write or read, nothing else, or speak eventually. And that's it. And for me, that is wiping out humanity. For yes, we do say that the world started as a word. And there's many intellectual traditions that depend on a statement like that. But obviously, as living beings, we know that there's more to it all than what is in that sentence. Let there be light and there was light, or I thus create you and thus you exist. There's more to us than the fact that we might be a creation, and the creation of a word, for instance. So, yes, we did run away from the wider picture, and up to now we've visited 2 or 3 reasons why we ran away from that. One, of course, is politics. If there is a secret of power, it could be certainly its opacity, the ability not to see how it functions. When you know how things are done, you are partly becoming master of them. So, to a certain extent, not having the full picture is productive for power relations. You might say this is bollocks, this is naive Marxism, whatever. Marxism was one of the reductionist games. Yes, you can say it. But it doesn't kill off the truth that it doesn't help power if it is clearly pictured in the way it functions. And certainly, if that is true, it will also be true that power will not then sit quietly as somebody tries to portray its function. It will do its best to disable the process. And to a certain extent, I do believe, and it is a belief, more or less, I do believe that that is one of the things that is going on. There's nodes of political interest which invest not only money but political power into making us do things in the way that complies with their interests. Now, this might be a banal statement, or it might be a revolutionary statement. And what I fear is that today it's more of a revolutionary than a banal statement. Because we are getting out of the habit of taking that for one of the things that count in our science. And that is for me the white picture. We are getting accustomed to playing with the powers in a way that suits the powers. And we profit from that. There was a meeting of the Association of European Anthropologists some years ago, and one of the key leading figures giving a lecture said that anthropology profits from its in-betweenness among the powers. The fact that anthropology is not taken by a set of governing powers, as some other sciences are, for instance political science, is something that has protected it and has kept its ability to remain one of the key providers of valuable insights into human life. That was a very valuable thesis, and I remember it still and I cherish it. By not being of interest to the powers, we have been preserved from the effects of being near to power. And these effects always modify the end results, the wide picture that we produce. And being outside of that game was, according to that theory, something that helped us remain one of the strong voices in human sciences. One of the voices that has to be heard because it has something to say. Not the things that are needed to be said, but the things that are relevant about the world. But I fear that was a moment of insight into our position that is not any more relevant for what is going on. And that is a very strong pronouncement. And I know that I'm gambling everything on it. But as I told you, I want to share a feeling. I don't want to make statements about how the world is. I want to share a feeling with you because I believe that's one of the things that made us what we are. The openness, the sharing, the freedom to say what you think, I believe is one of the fundamentals of human sciences and of anthropology. If we lose that opportunity, if we close ourselves into checking out, are we right, only according to a given standard, whichever standard it be. And you can clearly see that we're doing that from what is going on here. If you look at your presentations, if you look at the language of your presentations, you will see that you are checking yourselves, we are checking ourselves according to a given standard. And that is good, because that makes us better. But it doesn't change the fact that we're checking ourselves according to a standard. And what I believe is going on in anthropology is that we've arrived at a number of standards, many of which are very productive, and some of which are not quite productive. For instance, and let me give you at least one example. For instance, and that is, I think, at the heart of what I want to say. What I want to say is that things go by. They are like elements in water. they're not fixed, they're not discernible as the edges of this object. They flow. And as they flow, they change. So at a certain time, what was giving us strength, what was opening us to the world, in a matter of years, might start closing us. Because the world is changing, because what we think or how we think is emptying itself out of sheer use. And it becomes stiffening. For instance, we've done a great job of understanding how identities, how identification functions. The sheer movement from the concept of identity to identification is I wouldn't say revolutionary, but is spectacular in the sense that it helps us understand a process much better than the models that we had before. But on the other hand, what happened in the way is that we now take seriously some of the consequences of the models that we adopt, and which really worked in the sense that they were moving us away from stiffening ways of thinking about what we are and why we are what we are, away to propositions about us not necessarily being anything. From the move from identity to identification, some have made the conclusion that identity is a foreword, is something that should be thrown into the basket and ended with. And personally, I wouldn't agree with that. And I think if you think about yourselves, you wouldn't agree either. There is, in all the change in our lives, in all the accommodations, there is an element of constancy. And that element of constancy we try to label with identity. And it's not a good way of labeling it. And it produces outcomes which might be debilitating. But when you, out of a truthful wish to get out of the straitjacket, produce another way of seeing it, it can, at a certain moment, become a straitjacket itself. So, what I want to say is that running away from the ways that we think or thought about reality was very productive at certain moments. Now, it is not anymore. So, what I want to say towards the, let's say, the half of what I have as time is that running away from the wider pictures is not any more productive in our science, in anthropology. And we should think about ways of integrating the wide picture. And one of the concepts that can help us in that pretty tedious task is reality, realism, or whatever you want to name it. But it's a good label to think about the things that we started omitting. But you might say, well, give us a good definition. But it's not a thing, it's a way of relating things. And the way of relating things, the best part in it is taking into account the widest possible focus. And that is, as we started, that is something that we have deliberately been rejecting. And rejecting, as I said, for a multitude of reasons, some of which are completely legitimate, and some of which were extremely productive. Perhaps the greatest gains that we had in these, let's say, 2 or 3 decades that are behind us, came from running away from the straitjacket of realism, as it was. So, it's not that we were dumbos who lost the key of life. On the other, rather we gained. But what I want to say with this metaphor of flow is that we were gaining for a certain period of time. Now we're not gaining anymore. A different way of putting things is needed, and it has to take into account reflection on what and how, what might be called reality and how we can correspond with it. These are problems with which human thought has started. So returning to them is not a novelty of any kind, but it is a novelty if 30 or 40 years ago your discipline said that reality is a business for mystics. Okay, it might be in a certain way. If you think of it in a certain way, it certainly is a business for mystics. But then it might also be a business for metaphysicians, and metaphysics is not to be rejected as lightly as mysticism. And mysticism itself shouldn't be rejected at all. It's a credible way of understanding what is around us. As people sensitive to human ways of relating to what they believe is important to their lives, we shouldn't reject it. Rather, we should ask ourselves, if that is mysticism, how does that mysticism function? What can it tell us about where we are? So what I basically propose is that we stop rejecting the things that made us as good as we are in order to make ourselves even better. But how can that be done? That is a much more difficult question. But it has to do with what we believe is important and what we believe is not, and what we believe are the mortal sins of our discipline. And for instance, one of the mortal sins of our discipline has up to recently been essentialization. If there is a word that can curse your career, it is that you are an essentialist. It is that you ascribe to entities, to people, an essence of their own. That you believe that they have something in themselves that explains why they are what they are and how they can be what they are. Now, of course, if you by essence mean race, if you by essence mean even culture, yes, then essentialism might be a sin, because obviously if that is that, then it doesn't explain it. It doesn't give a clue to somebody to understand why am I who I am. But on the other hand, it kills off the question itself. It kills the question of why am I the one that I am. And it kills the possibility of me being who I am. I cannot be who I am. I am something in between what I was and what I will be, but I will never be what I am. I am a project that is unfolding, and that will change tomorrow, and will change after tomorrow, and will change. And that is a very good way of thinking of ourselves. But then we forget that there is something that makes possible that trajectory. What is it that makes possible the trajectory of change? That is us. We have stopped thinking about that because there's a curse word that, if applied to us, can break our back. It means stopping reflection. It doesn't mean that we have to go back to race or eventually culture and say, okay, yes, we threw out the baby with the water, so let's take back the baby. No, it means remaining open for different ways of envisaging what is it that makes the trajectory. What is it that is the continuity in the flow of change that we are? And to a certain extent, I believe that what is going on right now, and what even more will be happening, is a strong pressure from the forces outside, from the forces that up to now we've been happily evading, a strong pressure to take into account these facts, which to a certain extent is good, but which will create a lot of problems. Why? Why? Again, because of the context, because of what is going on. Obviously, there is something very wrong with the way the world functions. And obviously, there's a rising demand for answers as to how the world can be made more functional. And obviously these answers will be coming from people like us. Not necessarily anthropologists, but anthropologists included. And the pressures for these answers are rising. And what I want to share with you is an insight or speculation, if you want, of what these pressures will mean for how we will do the things. And one of them most certainly will be a redefinition of how we think about ourselves that will be more deterministic. And when I say more deterministic, it means that it will be related to the sciences that we despise, like genetics. There will be a strong pressure for us to become more predictable beings because there will be a need for us to comply even more efficiently with the demands of the political moment. And theories that explain us as such and thus legitimize, thus create the realities that are needed, will be needed. And there will be people who will be producing them. So we will be getting among the forces sooner than we expect, and with more ferocity than we expect. Perhaps I'm being too pessimistic. I know that it's not something that is out there, and it's a feeling, it's a speculation, it's an insight into the ongoing. But I wanted to share it with you because I believe that even if it is completely wrong, even if it's stupidity, it's worth taking into account, because if it is taken into account, then the possibility of such a stupidity becoming reality is lesser. And I would very much join in with the forces that would make it lesser. Therefore, I believe that we should take it into account, even if it's absurd at the moment, because by doing so, we will be cutting off some of the powers that might make it so. Make it what? Make it more deterministic, more essentialistic, make it more like, make the image of humankind more like what we detest right now. And we perhaps do detest it with a lot of reasons, because one of the reasons why we detest it is exactly because of the consequences of certain ways of seeing. Essentializing reduces human potentialities. And therefore, if you start from a premise that there is a given whatever that is in fact taking care of how you will develop in time, then by implication you are reducing these developments in time to some sort of a code which is already there. You're cutting the opportunities from future, and you're reducing them to something that is already inscribed. At least if the metaphor is okay. I don't believe that the metaphor is okay, and I believe that we to a certain extent, we rejected the bad water because it was a bad metaphor. What I believe is that we should continue trying and not be content with the rejection. And what I feel is that there will be pressures, but what I fear is that these pressures will be a new enclosure, that they will try to capture us, these pressures, to capture us in ways unforeseen up to now. That from a world where we perhaps got it wrong by saying that there's no limits to what we can be, that we will be entering a world where it will be asked from us to accept very clear and very straight-jacketing limits in the very near future. And I believe it's happening already, and we are already accepting, but are accepting because we're not aware. For instance, if we return to the metaphor of the square, we are accepting the cameras. Do we object? Perhaps some. But we are under surveillance. And we continue living on as if it's normal, as if it's okay. When I go on the internet, I am knowable to I don't know whom, but certainly many. And if the information that I leave around, that I scatter around my activities, is taken together, it produces a pretty reliable picture of what I want myself to be, which might profit somebody who wants to predict my behavior. For instance, on which site I will be going. If going to that site might mean encountering advertisements. For instance, it went to sleep. Well, anyway, it will return. For instance, there's this advertisement of Converse. Converse is it's an entity that produces canvas shoes, or it started as an entity that produces canvas shoes. Now it produces much more things. But there's this advertisement that says, let's wait for what it says. But it says something about the moment, and I can't explain why. It hits the same nail on the same head. Now, why it does so, it might be, it might be completely irrelevant to this discussion, but on the other hand, it might not. So it says the right to be real. And I believe somehow, in a certain way, it goes to this new way in which we will be thought about as entities much more realistic and probabilistic than up to now. Up to now, amongst other people, we as anthropologists have been producing an image of humankind, of human individuals, as much more open to change and flux, much more independent from any preconceived future. What I fear will be demanded from us is to give a more reductionist, a more probabilistic image of us as people who behave and are ready to behave, and therefore is right of somebody to expect that they will behave and to enforce that they will behave in such a way in more neat and narrow ways. And I fear that it will be explained by some of the sciences that we laugh at this moment. Laugh at because they're so damn wrong in their imagining of what we are. And where we are completely right to be laughing at them, and even more scorning, I don't know the word. But where in several decades we'll be in a position that will be the exact equivalent of them. I fear that we'll be laughed at for the naivete with which we took humankind, for the boundedless, you can't even say nature, for the boundedless project, the open project that is humanity, which will be contrasted with a relatively different idea of a set of not necessarily rational choice options, but options which are much more predictable and which have the iron from the iron law in it, which therefore create behavior in a way that will be desirable. You might call me a prophet of gloom, but I'm sharing it with you now, because there were other moments in history when people were prophets of doom, and doom did come. Of course, that doesn't make me a prophet, or anybody else who feels the same. And I believe there's certainly among you some who feel the same. But it is a duty to a certain extent. I feel it as a duty. I feel as a duty to not speak about particularities of a discipline, not discuss, for instance, how and why anthropology in Serbia became anthropology, whereas it started as ethnology. It's very interesting for me, but not necessarily for many others, and it's completely irrelevant for what I want to say now. And what I'm saying now, I believe, is far more relevant, both for me and for you, than any discussion of that. But, of course, I might be a prophet of doom and gloom. I might be somebody fooled by his inability to understand the flow of time and the factors, and I'm willing to share it with you. I'm willing to say openly that what I'm saying might be absurdities. But on the other hand, if by any chance that is not an absurdity, I believe then it should be shared, and not only shared, but some action should be taken. What sort of action? I think, and I've already said it several times, I think we have to find ways of making broader pictures. It's not very easy. It's not easy because it goes against it. The rich detail, the colors, everything that we're good at conveying, transmitting, it doesn't fit in well with theoretical frames like I don't know, before you had, for instance, world systems theory. Now, you might laugh about it, but it was one of the ways, one of perhaps the more intelligent ways of giving the widest possible context to human activity everywhere around the globe. But of course, if you want the full richness of people moving in a square, it doesn't help you if you start or end, or if you go in between with an image of the world as a system, the world as becoming a system, in the last 500 years. What does a process of 500 years add to a move that we make, to the juice of life that is in the move? Nothing. So that is the problem. That is the problem that we're facing. How can something that some people believe is essential to our very future, how can we make it in a credible, in an acceptable way? And I don't have easy answers for that, and I don't believe many have easy answers. But saying that we don't have easy answers and ending the game are two completely different things, and with very different outcomes, one of which might be that very invoked doom. Yes, you will laugh, yes, you will consider me why not, an idiot? Okay. But what will we consider ourselves to be if we become responsible for what will be happening to us? What will we think of us then? How will we die when death comes to us if we haven't made what might have been the move away from death? And when I say death, I think about what we lived through, because it's near, it's very near many people now. It was near us some time ago. It's near to other people, and it will be near to even other people very soon. That is how it functions. That is how the world functions. We might be able, in a small way, but we might be able to be a force that diminishes the killing, the death, if we take into account the killing and the death and the motives for it in our picture. But how to do it is very... What is going on in the battlegrounds of the world? What has it got to do with the move of hips? And should it be there? I don't know, but I have a feeling that if we let ourselves forget the challenge, that we'll be doing something which we might regret later on. Of course, yeah, you might say, well, what a wasted time. We could have been discussing some of the niceties of the profession. I believe this to be a nicety of the profession. I believe this to be at the core of the profession. What can we do for the world that we're living in? And how the way we think about the world we live in affects the world that we live in. For instance, let's take methodological isms, methodological nationalism. There was a time when sciences in this region, sciences like ethnology or whatever you called it at that time, were considered national sciences. They were considered sciences that could bring good to the nation. They were nation-creating sciences. They were, in fact, by investigating human realities, they were creating human realities. But in order to create these realities, they had to consider them as existing in a certain way. So the reality of a national project, of the outcome of a national project, was made possible by taking nation for granted, for existing in the field, and by investigating certain cultural aspects of the nation as if the nation existed. That is what made nation possible to a certain extent. It's not everything. It's not the whole story about it, but it's part of the story. These sciences, our science here, in this region, has created the realities it set out to investigate as it investigated them. To a certain extent, it has made the bridge by crossing it. The bridge was not there. The entities that the sciences said they were investigating, listing the key qualities of, were not there. They were made as the qualities were listed. To a certain extent, what we do now is comparable, though we do the opposite. We make ourselves open to change. We make ourselves less describable, so to say, less predictable, by starting from a position which takes us as such. By saying that we have no essence, we change from people who have a destiny into people who are an open project. But we do something that is problematic on the way, and that is we take that description and the fact that it is corroborated by what happens as reality. Whereas it is a mechanism. It is a mechanism by which reality is created, but it is not reality. It is real in the sense that it produces outcomes, but it is not that something outside. It is a way of relating to that something outside. We often confuse these things. Why? Because we don't care about reflecting about these things, because we consider that irrelevant. And the paradox of it all is that we are scorning reality as the masters of description of reality. Not explanation, but description. Is there anybody who describes what is out there better than us? No. We have invested so much time into perfecting our writing, into producing something that is not only convincing, but is a form of being. And on the other hand, what have we done with it? We have stopped thinking about the relationship between that which is outside and that which is our creation. And we have let ourselves be created by the creation that we create. We have cut ourselves off from something that is beyond us. At least that goes for postmodernist anthropology. That is dead. Everybody knows that it's dead. Well, not necessarily everybody, but many know that it's dead. But we are inheritors of many of its ideas. And there were many good ideas in it, but there are very dangerous ideas in it as well. Now, what I'm proposing is that we constantly weigh what the consequences of how we think about life and people, what the consequences are, and that we take into account that there's elements in the wider picture that are interested in us having or producing this or that image of the world, because that image can help the world become as these interests wish it to be. And what I believe is essential to a science like ours is that we do not become volunteers in the project. Part of the trick of what is going to happen will be that the invitation will be presented as a quantum leap in our understanding of reality. I don't know whether I'm going too much in the abstract now, but what I said is that we will see, or some of us will see, the good reasons for joining in as coming from a better way of understanding how things function. But that would also be forgetting some of the good lessons. For instance, the lesson that to a certain extent what is part of our way of thinking of what is. And then, if we jump in, we will be those who will be creating what will be because of the way that we think about it. What I say is that we should preserve some of the fruits of what was our doom as our chance of salvation, so to say. I'm speaking in biblical terms because it is a story of creation and life and death, I believe. It's deadly serious. What we are doing is deadly serious. We just forget it from time to time because we tend to focus on things which for us don't seem to be deadly serious. But the way we do it, I believe, is deadly serious. And I, again, might be completely wrong in it. I might be an idiot. But this idiocy comes from perhaps a naive belief that we are and should be part of what is going on, but in the right way. And of course, further idiocy comes from the belief that one might speak about the right ways. What does that mean? One of the things that we've learned is that there's no right way. That was the lesson, the great lesson of anthropology to a certain extent. There's no right ways. Every way is a human way. Well, yes and no. We know it. I believe we all know it as humans. Yes, everything that humans do is human. And as such, it is part of the rich heritage of humanity. But still, not everything should be permitted. Perhaps anthropology is not the science to decide what should and what shouldn't be permitted. But what I fear is that in 20 years, somebody will be asking the future anthropologists, perhaps you, not me certainly, perhaps you, to be one of the judges of what is and what isn't human. Because the way we will be thinking about humanity then will imply these possibilities. It is blasphemy to anthropology now. It might not be blasphemy to anthropology in 50 years. And what I want to do is to make us aware of that possibility, because it seems so damn impossible now. As anthropologists, we might only laugh at that. But there were times when people were defined by an essence in them, and I believe that in the future somebody might come with that idea again. He might say, well, you know, if I really want to know you, I will look into your genes, and I will tell you who you are and what will come out of you. People are already telling you, they're predicting your future, our future, from a set of traits which they don't even fully understand how they work together. But they are telling us that we will die with in our 50s from cancer. Or that there's a probability that we will die. And that, well, that is where we might be, finding ways of taking into that sort of knowledge and balancing it with what we know up to now of how we make ourselves. then that knowledge is not destiny. That knowledge is empowerment. It's a chance for us not to die of cancer in our 50s. But we have to have a standing ground from which we will say, what you are telling me is not my foretold destiny, but one of the open-ended possibilities to which I will either be going or from which I'll be going, depending on how I understand that very threat. And that is how I believe we should be engaged with what is coming as let's say, a deterministic threat in what will be the sciences of man of the future. We should bring in what we have achieved up to now, what we have acquired, what we have come to know. The fact that, to the best of our knowledge, we are the products of ourselves. That many things come into our project and determine it in this or that way, make it lean in this or that direction, but that never any of these forces can reduce the possibility that we have in ourselves of determining, of joining in our own project. I believe it's perhaps the best thing that we can offer humanity. This knowledge of how many things influence us and how little of these fundamental influences can catch us into a closed project. This is, I believe, to a certain extent, good news for humanity coming from anthropology. It doesn't come only from anthropology, but I think we should preserve it in times where this will be one of the legacies against which people will be fighting, from this very science, from the core of what will be, what I suspect will be our very science in 50 years. Well, you know, it's not bad to hear a bird with an ugly song from time to time. It makes you enjoy the beautiful songs more dearly, more profoundly. I'm an ugly bird, and I'm saying ugly things in a moment which I believe is unfortunately not very bright. But yes, sun is shining. Yes, you're young and full of energy. Yes, your life projects are open. Yes, you will contribute to them by doing anthropology in the way you obviously already are doing, and which will become even better. Yes, we perhaps are contributing to that, but yes, there is a wider picture, and yes, there is a camera going on. Fortunately enough, this is not a CC thing, but yes, beyond this camera there's another camera, and beyond that one there's another camera. We are in a world in which we are caught by a certain set of other people's assumptions to what will happen with us. And that can't be written away by the way that we write or think about the way that somebody enjoys sun this very day, which is very important, which is fundamental for our understanding of humanity, but which is not the full image, because beyond the sunlight on the leaves and on our faces and on our skin, and beyond our appreciation of the beauty of the moment, there is something that is already happening to somebody else who has enjoyed something very similar a moment ago and is not anymore enjoying it, who is at this very moment dying perhaps of some bombs because some bloody idiot believes that he has the right to organize the world in the way that profits him or her. Yeah, well, you might say, this is pointless, this is banal, this is, it's even bad taste to a certain extent. But, you know, between being an accomplice and having bad taste, I'd opt for bad taste. I let myself be an idiot if that is the price for not becoming an assassin or an accomplice in an assassination. And believe me, and you all know it, just put the TV on. There's a lot of assassinations going on. And they have to do with the way the world is organized. They're not mere events. They're not, you know, well, yeah, I was driving on a road and yes, there was a bump and I hit the bump and that's how the accident happened. They're not that. They're results of intentions. And these intentions, to a certain extent, are legitimated at this very moment by people very much resembling ourselves. It's not us that are doing it, but there's other blokes very much like us who do more or less the same job of explaining what people do and why they do it, who are explaining that it's very good to throw bombs. I've been through that already. I've seen people, even from the discipline of anthropology, say, yes, yes, of course, yes, you should be bombed. So I'm not inventing things. I'm telling you what happened, what I lived through. And to a certain extent, if we don't take what we do deadly serious, we might be, in some future moment, we might be the one who will be telling, yes, of course, you should be bombed. Because the way that we explain the world might make it probable and desirable. And that has already happened. And not once, many times. And people doing more or less the same job did more or less the same thing already. And what is my fear is that they'll be doing it once again. And what I want to do is react against it. And my only way of doing it is this: sharing with you my dark concerns. And thus, perhaps making it possible that as many people as there are here will have that dark thought in their mind and will act accordingly, will take it as an option and will use it in their future decisions in such a way that will prevent them from becoming those who will say, yes, you should be bombed. But that doesn't fall from the sky. It comes up from the way that we reflect upon the way that we do what we do, the way that we do the science that we believe in, identify with, practice, or whatever. And it has to be in the equation at a certain moment if you want to evade some opportunities which are the end of opportunities for others at a certain moment. Well, more or less that was my sermon of doom to you. What you will make out of it, whether you go home saying, well, there was this bloke who came and wasted his and our time on stories of doom and gloom, or whether you take it as I take it, as something essential for the way that we practice what we practice, as something that we should always have in our minds, as something that to a certain extent we are responsible for. I don't know, I can't, I did my best, as I know of it, to share it with you in the way that I believe is giving what I believe in a chance. But what a chance, and the chance for what that will be in your life project, I don't know. I don't know. What has that got to do with the concept of be a recipe of how to do things, how to take in the wider picture, and how to and in what way can that wider picture depend on the concept of the real. Typing critical realism and then reading whatever you can get is a good starting point, but that's not a panacea. I don't believe that there's right and wrong ways, and that if we follow a certain intellectual tradition, we'll then be on the right side. What I do believe is that we should be open and do as what anthropologists have always done, steal bits and pieces from here and there, and integrate them in a meaningful way, which means meaningful for us. We should start from what is meaningful for us. Then it might grow into like a snowball, grow into something that is meaningful for others as well. That is also something that I believe is a legacy of this science. Unlike some other sciences where the authority of the tradition of the discipline was so damning, we have an authority of the outcomes that is weighing on us, but not necessarily on theoretical frames. What is a creative burden on our shoulders is this message of the openness of humanity, and the message of evading clear-cut, short answers to questions as to what is at stake. But on the other hand, what I want to say is that where our strengths are, thus lie our weaknesses as well. Because while we are not obsessed by some of the things that political scientists are obsessed with, or a certain stream of traditions of thought, while we are much less succumbing to certain theoretical fads, we are very susceptible to a disciplinary fad, which has to do with these strengths of our discipline. We hold our breakthroughs, our legacy to humanity so dear that we are not fully capable of engaging with it in a creative way. We take it, yes, we take it damn seriously, and because we take it damn serious, which is very good, we sometimes also damn it. The ability to push away borders and limits of the human project, and therefore to give a message of the potentiality, the open potentiality of humanity, is also a siren song, in the sense that it pushes us away from asking questions as to why is it so? What is it that makes us so open in our life projects? Yes, the openness is something that is, on the one hand, dear to us, on the other hand, real in the sense of being outside of it, is a legacy of our discipline, but is something that we should contribute to the explanation of as well. And we have stopped doing these things. I believe somebody else will be joining in this effort and will be offering explanations. And what I fear most is that these explanations will be susceptible to closing that very project, that very open project that we understood as being at the core of humanity. And to a certain extent, what I expect from this discipline, from us as members of it, is to take our stand against it. And I believe there's various ways of taking. There's the everyday, and there's the exceptional circumstances. The everyday is what we do, what we produce. The quality of our engaged relationship with the other, and the mastering of ways of transmitting that quality in paper or in film or whatever. That is the everyday trick that we do, and that is what makes this project a meaningful one. But there's moments also when we have to do more, when we have to answer to ourselves and to others these questions about the wider frame, that might explain why there will be no more frame for some, including perhaps us, at a certain moment. That is our responsibility, and we have to find ways. No blueprint, no simple, but taking into account an engaged relationship to something that is beyond us, taking the possibility that something exists beyond us, without that something being related to the way we think about it, is, I think, a good start. And to a certain extent, that good start was killed in our discipline 20 years ago. Or at least there was an attempt at assassination. And it was very popular amongst many who practiced our discipline. The idea that there is nothing, or that I cannot know anything, or that there is no point in discussing what is beyond, not me, but my words, was a dogma of this science. And the belief that we can master the world by translating it to the word is also a dogma of our science. There is more to the world than the word. But we have to find ways of transmitting that in words, in a credible way. And that is, I believe, the task from the very beginnings. And I think religion was very good at that. So we should learn. We should try to learn from it as well. We've stopped believing that we are a science, but we haven't stopped having prejudices against other ways of thinking, like religion and mysticism. Perhaps it's time to start learning from them, while there still is time, while there still is religion and mysticism, while there is still us. And I'm serious about it. It's so incredible. The sun is shining, we're talking, the camera is filming. What on earth am I speaking about? But tomorrow, there might not be a tomorrow. And what is the relationship with that option of what we do today? That is what the meaning of this event was. That we should take that into account, and we should reflect on options. What is it that we can do so that there is a tomorrow? For everybody, not only us. For everybody. For those who are, by some like us, written out of the history of humanity, as those on whose heads bombs have the right to fall. And yes, sometimes the pronouncements are made by people doing very much things like we. And some people from this trade have done things like that. They have participated in an attempt to assassinate societies. But then societies don't exist. So nothing happened. Well, it did happen. And those who said societies don't exist were part of what happened. Somebody told Margaret Thatcher that societies don't exist. And that somebody was somebody like us. Somebody else told some other politician something else. And then he went on to invade Iraq. We have a responsibility. The way we understand the world creates real consequences in the world. And there's a set of people who are wanting to hear things from us that will legitimate their future actions. If they don't get us, they'll get somebody else. So what is it that we can do to delegitimate? And one of the things that we can do is start putting them into the picture. Not taking them out as irrelevant, as ugly, as not deserving of our attention, because not human enough. The fact that somebody is not human enough doesn't make him less potent in influencing the future of humanity. And we have to take that into account. And we have forgotten taking that into account. Well, if that is an ending, then so it be. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. We still have about 20 minutes for questions. Yes.
Thank you for your paper. I'm really interested in your topic and target, as my research is the same, and that's why I wanted to ask you. Well, I'm not sure if it's a why question or a how question, somewhere between methodology or not. We're talking about two different things, in my opinion, at some point, about widening the frame and taking many things into account, which doesn't this lead to a generalization, and also where should you stop? And the second, you're talking about metaphysics. And both of them are, I mean, there are two different directions on the one hand. And secondly, do you have any idea, because, I mean, that's what I'm trying to get to, and I have no idea how. How should you bring metaphysics in the discourse so it doesn't sound like a metaphysics discourse and it's still anthropology? I mean, how can you still stick to anthropology or archaeology or whatever and don't stop doing them? I mean, at some point you can say, well, theology or philosophy, it depends what you are. It's enough.
Of course, no simple answer, but one that I think we're not so strong at, and that is letting other people from other disciplines do some of the job, and taking, look, for let's say at least 30 years. Yes, we have been taking things from other disciplines, but we've been taking it in such a way as to present them as almost our own product. And we were very good at reselling that what we took away. But we didn't, we anthropologized it on the way. One of the things that we should perhaps try to do is okay, let these guys from the philosophy department or some other department, let them have their say, and let's attentively listen to what they say, and let's take as our standing ground some of the things that they say, without necessarily trying to develop our own. We've been doing that in a very in a very hush-hush way. There's a lot of philosophy in how we think about the world, but it's not explicit philosophy. We keep the tags away. So my first proposition is keep the tags there. Be clear about who, why, when you're using, and what goes with it, and not accommodate it so elegantly into our way of saying, because with the accommodation comes and the appropriation comes the distortion, the need to fit in. So I'd say that we should even though we are a science that believes itself to be very open to other sciences, we should be more open to other sciences as such, and say, okay, these are the limits, but this can be acquired by listening beyond limits, not necessarily changing the limits. So what I say is not that anthropology should become everything, but rather that anthropology should become more open to a set of sciences that live around it, some of which are those like philosophy who can inquire about what is there outside and how should we inquire about the possibility of it being outside or not. They're better at that. So let's hear more attentively what they have to say. Let's judge what of it is of use. But then let's listen to other things as well. Let's listen to other people who are saying something about what is outside of us. I'm particularly saying that we should listen a lot to those who might be offering the new paradigms, like people from genetics departments, because they might be doing it in a way that we won't like. And so, no simple answer. The answer is keep our eyesight as broadly possible, as broadly open as possible, and take into account the developments that are going on at this time in some other sciences that we don't necessarily consider relevant for the way how we do things. Take them for what they are, for really fundamentally relevant, and see where that gets us. It's not a very good answer, but it's my answer. That's what I try to do. It's not very successful.
Yeah.
And they say to win a war, we should have good weapons and good historians. Can we replace historians by anthropologists? Always. You know that anthropologists were what was the militant side. But how can we remain without being a mercenary?
Mm-hmm.
So the core problem of anthropology is finally a moral problem. There are good anthropologists and bad anthropologists. How can we are on the good side?
Well, there's one. Perhaps I didn't get it out, but there's a tiny naive belief in me that we can do that by becoming more realist. What I personally believe is that science as a regulatory idea, as it existed some time ago, is a very good way of grounding a reasonable military. Now, it's anathema to much of what was going on in anthropology the recent decades, where even the use of word science for anthropology would be considered anathema. But I believe that by attentively listening and trying to sum up what different disciplines, sciences, are saying about the real, that we can start having a ground on which we can stop. So I don't believe that we should go into militancy from militancy itself. We should rather base our decisions for action in the real world on an understanding of what real really means. And to a certain extent, we have problems with that. If you look at the polemics between Belgrade and Shepherd Hughes, you see that the way that he plans to stand on sciences is questionable, but on the other hand, that the way she plans her action is questionable. What I propose is an integration by including what else is known, and I believe there's things moving there. For instance, one, and I've deliberately wanted to remember the name and I forgot it. It's a Scandinavian colleague who is trying at this very moment to develop, or let's say for the last 15 years, I believe, a phronetic science. That would be a science that is in between an applied science and a fundamental science, which would take into account the way, for instance, the way that we function as people, and that means basically the way that big systems function as big systems, because that is relevant for the world we live in today. To take that knowledge into the way that we imagine human reality, and to a certain extent to produce knowledge which is both based on something that comes from an understanding of how real world functions, and which is, because of that, applicable in the real world. Now, his recipes, I must say, and I can't still remember the name, but if you look for phronetic science, you will be led to the name. I can't say that it has seduced me in the intellectual sense, but the attempt, the initiative of taking into account something that we often don't even consider as worthy. For instance, practical handling of large systems. This person was engaged as a researcher in the analysis of the functioning of big systems like cities, ports, cities, things like that, and that is something, for instance, we don't do. It lacks the smack of what anthropology should look like. It doesn't have this relationship with the intimately human, with the I and the thou. It's lacking this perspective, and it takes systems for real. It takes something else which is not, which we don't take so easily. We have deconstructed culture. How not to deconstruct things like big systems, societies, and things like that. We don't like these things, and my proposition is let's start not necessarily liking, but taking for serious. Because that is one of the wider pictures that we can have, where we, as people who are experts in the I and thou relationship, will learn something from people who are experts in other types of relationships, which do affect the I and thou. And to a certain extent, they don't explain it, but they do affect it. And therefore, the I and thou can't be understood without it. So, it's not a recipe, but it's a path for investigation. Phonetics, social science, and critical realism. Not much to offer, but perhaps a good start.
Okay, I think we have time for 2 more questions, and then I'm sure you can ask also Naumovic during the break.
First, I would like to thank you for sharing with us your worries and so on. It was an adventure. And just to rephrase a little bit, I would like to see if I understood correctly. What drives us from today to tomorrow is the motivation. So the difference between paradise and hell on this planet is how we define motivation along centuries, because 500 years, you said, is just a glimpse of time for humanity. So it's how we define a motivation as a trend to encompass, because anthropology encompasses, embraces everything, let's say, which is human. Okay. For me, this would be the point, because as we can feel it now on the planet, there are a bunch of bad guys, let's say. It's likely they have a hidden agenda for the rest of us. So that's grossly simplified. But is it a way to think of it? How we motivate people? You mentioned religion, it's a way, and so on.
Well, I don't know if we are good at motivating people, but a good start is the way we motivate ourselves.
Yes.
One of the things that I believe will always be there as a motivation is the way we understand humanity. That is very good. The thing that I believe, and I tried to say that, though I didn't find ways of really saying it, is that the greatness and the opportunity that our way of seeing humanity offers is limited by us not taking into account some other aspects of it. So why not take into account the possibility of boundaries and limits as something that is inherent to us. Making a bright day possible, I believe, starts from taking into account rainy days as an alternative. Then you might say that you have chances of having sunlight. There's ways of interfering, but only if you start from the assumption that might be rain and sun, and for us as well. Now, it doesn't mean reductions to absurd propositions like the one you mentioned, the hidden agenda of an evil group. This is nonsense. but understanding the complexity of what is joining in with something else, which we did try as something that would be our hallmark. Sticking to that and reviving it in a way should be something that, or might be something that can motivate us. Find a way of having that wider picture, by perhaps including some of the developments in other sciences, by taking into account the possibility that we might, for instance, that we might take our position as people who explain the world more seriously. We generally run away from what we have to say about the world. We are very good at finding ways of saying things about how other people say things about the world. But in that way, and then came an obsession with our own words. But why not become obsessed by what we can say meaningfully about the world as anthropologists? Meaning, how is it that we see the white picture? How is it that we see? We either discredit it or don't speak about it or reduce it, or what is it that we can say as I don't know, as anthropologists, but as people who would normally like to pronounce themselves on how the world functions. We don't like that very much. We don't like that very much. We haven't produced too many theories of how the world functions. That to an anthropological ear, that is ridiculous even. What I propose is that it shouldn't be so ridiculous. Not that we should become metaphysicians of the political, but that we should find ways of accommodating into the way that we want to see the world, the ways in which other people, other scientists see the world, and that can help us in what we do, and that can help us so that what we do becomes more meaningful for the world, more realistic and more applicable in the world. By which I also imply that I believe that we have something to offer to the world. But if what we have to offer to the world is the beauty of our verbal redemption of it, that's not much. Or the idea that it is complex beyond any reductionism, that is not very good either. So what I believe we should try doing is finding something which will be as complex as we like it, but applicable as a rendition of how the complexity of the world functions. We have to return to that, I believe. And it goes against some of the most ingrained identities that we have as anthropologists. That is how I feel it. So it will be a very difficult and very painful task.